And now it's time for another exciting adventure with Elements of the Sentence! Today's topic is, what are the three cores of a sentence? Have you ever heard the expression that language is like an onion? Well, it's true, because as you can see, just as language has layers, so does an onion. Today, we're going to be focusing on the core and the outer parts of the core. What is the core of a sentence? Well, I'm glad you asked. As you can see from our sentence tree, the sentence at its core is broken into a noun phrase, which includes a noun, and a predicate phrase, which includes a verb. These make up the subject and the predicate, all under the declarative sentence. So, the subject plus the predicate equals the core. Glad we solved that mystery. So we get that the core is the subject plus the predicate, but do you know why the core has to be the subject plus the predicate? The subject and the predicate are essential because if we take them out, the sentence makes absolutely no sense. So now that we understand what the core of the sentence is, it's time to delve back into our onion. We must now ask, where does that leave all of the other layers that are outside of the core? Sure looks like this little guy is glad we're asking, because guess what? Those outer layers, although not essential, are important too. The outer layers have two types. These types are the pre-core and the post-core. Let's check out the pre-core first. Something that's in the pre-core simply means that it comes before the subject or the predicate. In this sentence, during a rainstorm is in the pre-core. Now that we know what a pre-core is, we can understand that there are two types of phrases that can be in the pre-core. Those two types are the pre-adjunct and the adverbial. Let's take a look at the pre-adjunct. Pre-adjuncts are unique because they usually occur at the beginning of a sentence. They set the tone. They situate the sentence within the speaker's attitude, speaker's views, and they are set apart by a comma. Comma! As you can see from this example, sadly, I have a hole in my shoe is an example of a pre-adjunct because it is set apart by a comma. It shows the speaker's views, and it sets the tone because it's sadly, that is a pre-adjunct. Check this one out. In my opinion, Harry Potter is greater than Twilight. I'm shiny. Do you see how that is a pre-adjunct? Our second type is an adverbial. Adverbials are special because they tell where, when, or how the subject of the verb. Where, when, or how And, unlike the pre-adjunct, it occurs frequently in both the pre- and post-core. Let's try some examples. Let's see if you can find a reoccurring theme in these. So, at the gym, I whistled a tune. Under the moonlight, I whistled a tune. Carefully, I whistled a tune. In July, I whistled a tune. Loudly, I whistled a tune. Below the waves, I whistled a tune. During the day, I whistled a tune. At 7 p.m., I whistled a tune. Do you see how these show where, when, or how I whistled that tune? The musical dolphin understands. But let's move on to the post-core. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Post-core is the opposite of pre-core, meaning that it comes after the subject and the predicate. So Miranda sunbathed at the beach is actually part of the post-core because Miranda sunbathed is the subject and the predicate. So at the beach is our post-core and what we're going to be studying right now. We still have the two types of the adverbial and the pre-adjunct, but there's something special that's happening to the pre-adjunct. Do you remember earlier when we said that pre-adjuncts usually occur at the beginning of the sentence? Well, pre-adjuncts, if they come at the end of the sentence, have to be called posed adjuncts, and are pretty rare in grammar. But here's an example. They sold the Batmobile, unfortunately. Once again, notice, although rare, you will see that unfortunately has a comma before it. And finally, the second type, adverbials are still called adverbials in the post-core, and they still talk about when, where, and how. So, bringing back our lovely songstress, I whistled at 4 a.m. I whistled with the dolphins, and I whistled with the dolphins after dinner. So a good question to ask is, why was this onion so sad? Or really, why are the pre-core and post-core removable for a sentence? Well, they're removable because if you take them away, the message of the sentence still doesn't change. The true core is always going to be the subject and the predicate. That concludes this week's episode of Elements of the Sentence.